Welcome back to Comic Book History, episode 32. Yes, this is the 32nd episode. This time I'm talking about the Guardians of the Galaxy, the 2008 version, not the one someone back in 1968. That will handle one episode. Now, here's the thing about this particular group. Now, according to the current trades, you think, according to Marvel, they want you to starting point at the first trade that collects the run by Brian Michael Bendis. That is not where you start for Guardians of the Galaxy. You have to go back to 2006, because apparently Marvel doesn't want you to buy that many trades, even though that greedy. You start with the very good event known as Annihilation, released in 2006. It was concluded in 2007. But here's the thing. There was two other events going the same year that kind of basically indirectly buried this event and wasn't very well known outside people basically. But here's the thing. When you think of the year 2006 Marvel, what one really big event do you think of when you think of Marvel Comics in the year 2006? Civil War 1. Yeah, Annihilation was the alternative to that. Because it's good, sci-fi epic. Yeah, it's a bunch of characters not people very much know. I mean, the biggest character, the whole crossover, was the main villain of the crossover was Fantastic Four villain Annihilus. Excuse me. I mean, yeah, he is essentially put a D-list villain, but excuse me, the writer made it interesting. The person who wrote the main miniseries, that was Keith Giffen. One of the miniseries, which basically sprung into an ongoing series, and according to Marvel Comics, when this series celebrated 100th issue, this 4-issue miniseries was counted as part of the numbering. What miniseries was this for Annihilation? Nova. Yep, Nova. Nova pretty much took place right after Annihilation Prelude, and pretty much led into Annihilation #1. That's the way it was. Yeah, I'm kind of basically laying the ground roots here. Basically, there were two series that kind of led into Annihilation. One was the last 6 issues of the first Thanos ongoing series. Yes, Thanos had an ongoing series before 2016. Yeah, he had one a decade prior. It was not. I don't think it was done by Jim Starlin. It was done by somebody else. And it was a Drax miniseries released at the same time called Drax Destroyer. Lucky enough, Marvel has released two trade volume series called Road Annihilation. Has sort of basically Marvel's build up to Annihilation. It's an awesome event. They also have miniseries tied into it for characters like let's see, this event also brought back Star-Lord and Rocket Raccoon, who had not been seen since the early 80s. But the main hero of this crossover was Nova. Yep, and Quasar was in this crossover too. And this, of course, is the original Quasar, not the current one who was a lesbian. This one, he was killed by Annihilus during the course of the crossover. And then at the end of the crossover, basically, in the most graphic way possible, Nova killed Annihilus by ripping his heart out. I am not kidding about this. That is literally what happened to him. Oh yeah, you know the whole thing of Drax really wanted to kill Thanos? He kills Thanos in the end of this miniseries. I know it's a spoiler, but the miniseries came out 11 years ago. Of course, once this series wrapped, they also gave a miniseries for Ronan the Accuser, the Super Skrull, who was really had a son in this miniseries, but he died at the end of it. This event is amazing. Oh yeah, they even gave one for Silver Surfer. There was even one for Heralds of Galactus. And what was the big turning point of this crossover? Now, early on this crossover, Annihilus captured the one person who had never been captured before after this. He captured Galactus! And the way that the heroes won the whole entire thing was the big turning point was rescuing Galactus, and he was a big turning point for the Annihilation War. Yeah, and there was Annihilation War, which pretty much wiped out a good 80% of the Skrull Empire. Yeah, this wave killed a lot of people. Heck, this wave even just pretty much killed the population of Xandar and killed all the Novas except for Richard Rider, and the World One was put into his frickin' helmet, though the Nova Corps is back and alive and well, probably because of the Guardians of the Galaxy film coming out that came out a few years ago. That's probably the reason why they're still alive and kicking right now, despite the fact they probably don't know the fact that Richard Rider is alive and well. Yep. So, At this event, the following year we had Annihilation Conquest, where the main villain was Ultron. Yep, Ultron was the main villain, and of course we had the alien version of the Parallax, the Phalanx, which basically they did have a crossover like this back in the 90s, but it was humans basically to create this virus to turn into like the creatures. Though it was adapted basically into the X-Men animated series for the first arc of the final season of the show, but they changed to aliens, which they kind of used that concept for this crossover, and the leader was Ultron, of all people. Now, basically, how did Ultron get to space? Well, he was shot into space by the Sentry. Not kidding, they did this in the first arc of the series. Basically, the Sentry punched him so hard, he basically blasted him off into outer space, and that's how he got here. Yeah, they did this in the first arc of the Mighty Avengers comic. Not the one Al Ewing did a few years ago, but the one that came out right after Civil War 1. And that's the reason why he's there. And pretty much, the Guardians sort of come together thanks to this crossover. At the end, they do come together as a team, and they try to prevent more events like this from happening, though not big epic ones, so that more events happen. Ultron was defeated, and he was insane again for at least 5 years. That wasn't until that point one issue that came out, I believe it was in 2010, I believe it was. Yes, 2010. He came back a few years later, where he came back in the body of a Space Knight of all things, and that's what pretty much that's what launched the Age of Ultron crossover 3 years later. Yep. So after this crossover, basically the Guardians were like, okay, we need to stop bigger things like this from happening. Though basically we had some like War Kings, so like they could admit it. So basically, these were the founding members of the Guardians. Not just the 5 we see in the Guardians Galaxy, which is Star-Lord, Gamora, Rocket, Groot, and Drax. Not just these 5 people. We also had Mantis, who made her first live-action appearance in Guardians Galaxy Volume 2. You also people like Moondragon, Jack Flag. Moondragon is Drax's daughter. Not kidding. Look up. Let's see. Who else they have part of this team? I have to look. I think they also had the Bug. Let me look it up and see who else is part of this particular team. It was a pretty large team when it came to the Guardians. Yeah, they even had Adam Warlock briefly part of the team, and Phyla-Vell, the only known daughter of the original Captain Marvel, Marvel. Yeah, and she's a lesbian. She had a thing for Moondragon. Yep, they pretty much. If you want to thank somebody for setting up this particular relationship, you gotta thank Peter David for that. Yep. You gotta thank Peter David for that particular thing. Yep. Let's see. People part of this group for this incarnation. Okay. The inner when it first started was Adam Warlock, Drax Destroyer, Gamora, Quasar, this of course was Phyla-Vell, Rocket Raccoon, and Star-Lord. Yeah. Groot didn't join into issue 7. Yep. And then basically with issue 6 we also had they were kind of basically advising the team started at first for Mantis and Groot, but they later joined it later on. You had Major Victor, who is an alternate version of the character Justice from New Warriors. This is one of the several alternate versions of him. Yeah, they revealed this toward the end of the run. We also had the Bug, Jack Flag. At the end of the first year of the comic, we also had Cosmo the Space Dog, who was a creator of Annie Lenning, and he did appear both in the first and second Guardians film, though he was a small character. Basically, Cosmo is a Russian space dog who basically can speak telepathically. He speaks the Russian accent. Yep. I think he was sent back into space in the 60s. Yeah, of course, you had Moondragon join the group, basically in issue 12, and that was the lineup for pretty much the original run. Now, pretty much starting with issue 7 up until issue, I think it was, they had this thing from issue 7 up until issue 25, where it was part of a crossover. First, it was War of Kings, an awesome storyline that Dan and Lemmy did. Basically, War of Kings was the war between the Shi'ar and the Kree. Was it the Kree? Yeah, I think it was the Kree. No. Yeah, I think it was the Kree. Where During the course of the crossover, the Supreme Intelligence was killed again. They also had it where Black Bolt and Cyclops or Vulcan fought each other. They had a miniseries led up to this called Kingbreaker, which during the course of that miniseries, Deathbird was knocked into a coma, and also Vulcan captured the I think I'm trying to remember their name. They're basically space pirates. Trying to remember their name. They're heavily associated with the X-Men. Let's see. What is their name? And they had it where the original leaders. Let's see. They are the Starjammers. Yes, the Starjammers. Yeah, they were captured by Vulcan, and they were put in jail. Though they did have a follow-up to this in an issue of the miniseries The X-Men Divided We Stand, where basically Havoc shown being in prison. Yep. Then let's see. And then pretty much during the course of the crossover, you had the team sort of split into two teams. Like one team would take on the Kree, the other team would take on the Shi'ar. The Shi'ar at this point was actually led by Vulcan, because in the Uncanny X-Men series, during the 12-issue story arc known as Rise and Fall of the Shi'ar Empire, which is actually part 2 of a several story thing that led into War of Kings, where Vulcan, who was basically went to space to revenge the Shi'ar for the death of his mother, he pretty much killed a quarter of the Imperial Guard, and then pretty much also killed his future brother-in-law. Not kidding, he killed his future brother. He killed the Mad Emperor, and of course he overthrew his own sister-in-law. Yep, and Deathbird pretty much now, the Mad Emperor, the guy who'd been in a coma since the Phoenix Saga from the 80s. He actually did want Vulcan to marry Deathbird, because even he noticed the fact Deathbird had a thing for him. And during the course of that series, that storyline, Deathbird and Vulcan basically were shown in bed together, implying they had sex. Yep. So, yeah, that of course she was not in a coma. She wasn't seeing it until the X-Men series that came out a couple years ago. She was shown in the last arc of that series before the series abruptly had to end because of Secret Wars. Yep. So, they had it where in the final issue, basically, Black Bolt basically detonated a bomb that pretty much killed Vulcan and himself, though Hickman later retconned that a couple years later. Somehow he survived and came back with at least 6 wives. Not kidding. I'm sure Medusa wasn't happy with the fact he came back with 6 frickin' wives, and these were Inhumans from other planets. Not kidding about this. This is what Hickman did in the FF series. As for Vulcan, he's still declared dead. Roni Cusa took over as the leader of the Kree Empire, while in the case of Shi'ar, because Leandra was killed off during the course of the crossover by a brainwashed Darkhawk. Yeah, Darkhawk was pretty much brainwashed to kill Leandra by the Talons. That's the species where Darkhawk gets his amulet from. They pretty much killed her off. I think they killed off a few other members of the Imperial Guard over the course of the crossover. And then, in the aftermath of that, we had Rebel Kings, which later led to Thanos' Spirit. Like, Quasar went into the fault. Pretty much, it's this giant hole in space. It's not like a black hole, where basically black holes are created by supernovas. This is an actual giant hole in the space called the Fault. And Quasar went in to see what was inside of this thing, and what did he find? The Cancerverse, where in this universe, nobody dies. Yep, nobody dies in this universe at all. Of course, at this point also, they had it where Adam Warlock briefly became, he very much became Magnus. This was a future version that was introduced during Jim Starlin's run for Strange Tales. He pretty much basically embraced the future. There was also one point killed half the Guardians, and then they turned up alive well in stasis tubes. Yeah, you have to read the run. It's a really amazing run. Lasted 25 issues. From what I've heard, it was canceled due to low sales. That was the reason why the series had to end. But luckily, Dynamic and Living did tie up loose ends for this crossover. Of course, they had Roman Kings. They also had mini-series, which followed the Sakaar series, which basically had the Hulk's second son conquer Drilla's homeworld with the inhabitants of the survivors of the planet Sakaar. Let's see, there was one for the Starjammers, the Imperial Guard, the Inhumans had a mini-series deal with this one, where Quicksilver actually briefly went into space and basically sort of reconciled with his ex-wife, basically was on good terms with her. Yeah, Realm of Kings was a great little mini event before we had Thanos' Imperative, where the Guardians, and of course Thanos got resurrected at the end of this volume of Guardians, was the second volume of Guardians. He got resurrected, and the first thing he did, he killed Phyla-Vell right after he resurrected. Of course, when he was resurrected, he came out of his little thing butt-ass naked. I am not kidding about this. He was butt naked. And the first thing he did was he killed Phyla-Vell. And you know how long ago that was? This was back in 2010. This was 7 years ago. So Phyla-Vell's been dead for 7 years. Of course, they also ended the Nova title basically at the same time, and it's after 36 issues. Originally, I heard they could put the series in hiatus, but then I later found that they were canceled due to low sales. Probably because Marvel didn't promote the series really well, but both series, in my honest opinion, were really good. So, yeah, I'll give my recommendations basically at the end of the video. So, with this event, they had it where during the course of the 6-issue miniseries, Thanos, Drax, Star-Lord, and Nova, and of course Adam Warlock all died. Though Adam Warlock was later basically brought back thanks to the Annihilator miniseries, I'll get to in a minute. So basically, Nova sort of sacrificed himself in order to seal up the Cancerverse. Though basically this was later sort of revealed a few years later, basically how the other characters came back a couple years later. So the Cancerverse was basically sealed off. The Guardians disbanded, and they weren't heard from again for at least 2 years. And then they came back in Avengers Assemble, which I've done a review of the first, the trade that collected the 8 issues that Brian Michael Bendis did. Well, they came back, and there was at least a couple questions. One I actually forgot was answering the storyline. But there were 2 questions that need to be answered. One, when did the Guardians come back together? And 2, okay, why is it that Drax, Thanos, and Star-Lord are alive and well, and were Adventure Rare? That was really 2013. I'll get to in a minute. After the events of Thanos and Imperative, Cosmo the Space Dog have formed the Annihilators. Yep. And they form in the Aftermath issue of the event. Yep. I think it was him. I know it was Silver Surfer. Yeah. So, basically, the Annihilators consist of the Silver Surfer, Gladiator, Beta Ray Bill, Quasar, and Ronan the Accuser. This group had 2 miniseries. You have first miniseries Annihilators, and of course Annihilators Earthball, that was the one we found out that about Adam Warlock Sakumi on Earth. After that, the group wasn't seen to get into that trilogy of one-shots that Jim Starlin did a few years ago. Awesome one-shots, I highly recommend them. And they recently had to mention that in that Mother Anthem series. Okay, then after the Avengers Assemble storyline wrapped up, they later got their ongoing series back with the 5 characters who appear in the film, along with Iron Man. Yep, and they had a few others join the group during the course of this run. I mean, first you had Iron Man join, and then issue 9 you had Angela, and then the Free Comic issue is implied you had Agent Venom and Captain Marvel. Here is the thing about this: Captain Marvel only appeared in 4 issues out of the 27 issues of the entire run. She didn't show up until the Pendulum issue of the storyline that came out after another one. Yeah. First you had the storyline where they got the opening arc where they got their spaceship, which was the base operations. Their original base operations was the Nowhere Space Station. Now they have a spaceship. Then after that, they had the storyline with Angela, which is right after the events of Age of Ultron. Angela joined the Guardians right after this crossover ended. The story ended, basically. Then you had the trial of Jean Grey. Really good storyline. I have done a review. You have to check out my channel, look for it. Let's see. Then you have the Guardians Assemble storyline, which the name itself is a nod to Avengers Assembled. Yeah, the whole word disassembled, that actually has been used many times over the years. Aside from the main Avengers book, they've done this for Mighty Avengers, Iron Man. Let's see. Mighty Avengers, Iron Man, New Avengers. They've done this for, I believe, Avengers the Initiative. They've done this for that. They've done it for Guardians. And that's it. they use that particular word for particular story arcs, but half the time the group's in the span anyways. But there was that. This is, of course, a story that kind of indirectly set up the ongoing Star-Lord ongoing series, and of course, Rocket Raccoon got his own ongoing series, which was canceled after 11 issues. Star-Lord had his series canceled after only 12 issues, though we'll get to that in a minute. It's an awesome miniseries done by Sam Humphries. Yep. After that, after the Guardians of Simple storyline, we had the Original Sins tie-in, which, by the way, these issues, and I've talked about this in my original review, these 3 issues had nothing to do with Original Sin at all. It's just answering the question Bendis has been holding off. Now, the whole thing of when the Guardians get back together, there was a one-shot that kind of explained that. Yeah, it was Guardians of the Galaxy #1. That actually explained it. So, also there was this, in both the first and second Annihilators miniseries, there was a backup feature for both those series for Rocket Raccoon and Groot, basically what they're up to after the events of the series. Apparently, Rocket Raccoon became a janitor. Yeah, it's really odd, but it's actually a really great series, and I highly recommend it. Dan Abnett wrote both the first series and second series of Annihilators. Yeah, after Nails Imperative, the last book that he and Lanning wrote together was the prelude to the first Guardians of the Galaxy. That was the last book they did, because currently they don't write books together. Andy Lanning doesn't really do that much stuff at all when it comes to the Guardians, or at least anything comic wise. He hasn't anything probably in the last few years. Then after Original Sin, we had Thanos' symbiote storyline, which set up the Venom Space Knight series. So yeah, you gotta thank this line for setting up 2 ongoing series. Yep. And after that, we had the Black Vortex crossover, a very underrated crossover, but the crossover was buried due to the marketing of Secret Wars. Yep. And after Annihilation, basically, now toward the end of that storyline, we had a couple that came after that, where it revealed that Star-Lord became the Emperor of the Spartax, because his father got overthrown. So, yeah, he was named the Emperor. He initially liked it very much, but yeah, he became the Emperor, and of course, at the end of Black Vortex, he proposed to Kitty Pryde. Though, for some reason, apparently, everybody at Marvel forgot the fact that happened, because Kitty Pryde is now back with Colossus. Yep. After this great relationship that Bendis and Sam Humphries set up really well. Of course, this relationship was started thanks to trial Jean Grey. So over the course of 2 years' development, it's like, okay, let's just end this relationship for absolutely no reason and never mention again. I'm not kidding. I think the last time it was brought up was basically at the start of the current run, the previous run for Guardians. Then pretty much after Secret Wars, they had a 19-issue run where they had the whole thing where Peter Quill got overthrown. He got basically removed from power because people didn't like him. And then they freed Angela in prison. You had a time of the Civil War II, and that was when they lost their spaceship after having it for 3 years. The Grounded Starling, which had the main 5 characters go back to space. Though after this event, Angela wasn't seen much after that. But she did have a couple brief ongoing series. She just came back to the group, and now she's off the group again. It's really odd. Then we have the all-new Guardians of the Galaxy series where, and this was a great series. Gary Duggan took over with issue 1. And the only reason I could think of they decided to give Guardians of the Galaxy a new number 1 because the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 film came out this year. So they relaunched it, and after 12 issues, they restored it to its nostalgic number. I should also point out, though, that the 12th issue, according to Marvel, was considered to be the 100th issue of the series, and pretty much with what would have been issue 13 for all new Guardians of the Galaxy was named to Guardians of the Galaxy 146, basically where the Guardians are now part of the Nova Corps. And they're 100 Infinity Stones for some reason. Yeah, the only theory I have, the reason why that Marvel did this, I don't have a theory of why they have to join the Guardians, but I do have a theory of why they have Infinity Stones in the universe. Because they wanted to promote the Avengers Infinity War, which came out next year in May. Yeah, that's my only theory when it comes to that. But in my honest opinion, when it comes to all new Guardians of the Galaxy, this was by far a really good book, and I really enjoyed every single issue. Heck, they even had an issue where it featured any of the Guardians at all. It featured Richard Rider, of all people, in his second appearance since Nova ended. He actually, the second time he appeared. He also guest starred in the issue of Champions, of all things. Yeah, he guest starred in the issue of Champions. He came back in the book. Now, I basically pointed this out online, and few people agree me on this. Why couldn't we have a Nova ongoing series again? There's no reason why Nova can't have an ongoing series. Heck, I wouldn't mind if we had 2 Nova books. I mean, one for Richard Rider and the other one for Sam Alexander. But God forbid we have that because, we don't want to. Though I've heard a rumor that they might bring one of the human, they might bring one of the 2 Novas from Earth into the films. Now, it's probably either going to be Richard Rider or Sam Alexander. It's looking more like some people are thinking that it's looking toward putting Sam Alexander in the movies, but I think a lot of people are probably thinking that Marvel's going to put Richard Rider in the movies. Yep. But otherwise, though, that's really it when it comes to the Guardians of the Galaxy 2018. Now, pretty much everything related to this incarnation has been collected in trade. Everything related to Annihilation Conquest, War of Kings, Realm of Kings, Thanos and Imperative, the original Dynamic Annihilating Run, which is 25 issues, every single issue Bendis has done, and pretty much every single issue Gary Duggan has done so far. That's all been collected in trade. Now, it's like the second volume of the second volume for the modern day Guardians. But the third volume overall, it's like this book was was basically having 2 story arcs that set up 2 ongoing series. I'm not kidding about this. Basically, at the Guardians Assemble, we had Star-Lord get an ongoing series. Rocket didn't have any setup at all. He was just given one because he's popular. Though the end of it kind of led to his appearance in Howard the Duck. And the Planet of Sibyl story pretty much led into the awesome Venom Space Knight series by Robbie Thompson. Too bad that book got canceled and he got a Sibyl taken away for giving it to the boring Lee Pierce. Though now, basically, he's anti-Venom in the one-shot that basically set the Venom Inc. storyline. But what about the other Guardians? People who have been Guardians in the past, aside from the main 5? Well, let's see. As far as I know, Mantis and Moondragon were later added part of the Nova Corps. Yeah, pretty much like half of the group who was part of the Guardians for Dynamic Annihilating Run, they were pretty much added to they were added to Nowhere Corps, which simply put is like other half of the Dynamic Annihilating Guardians split in half and they're based out of nowhere. Jack Flag was killed up by Nick Spencer in the Steve Rogers Captain America series. Bug hasn't really appeared that much, aside from appearing in that one issue that featured the Nowhere Guardians. But as for everybody else who's part of this group, let's see. Thing, basically, he was added part of the group at the start of the book. And recently they added the second Ant-Man, Scott Lang, as part of the group. Because why the heck not? And they've had 2 encounters with the Future Guardians. They had it in the Guardians 3000 series. Awesome series. Got canceled after 8 issues because of Secret Wars. Yep. Where toward the end of the series, they met up with the Guardians again. And this one a few times. They actually remember the first time in the first series first volume that the 2008 version did have. They met with them again in the Guardians Infinity series, which was a series that was released alongside of the main book, which had the main story be, simply put, I think it was Rocket Raccoon, Groot, and Drax teaming up with the Future Guardians and the Guardians of the Year 1000. I'm not kidding about this. For some really big storyline. Yeah, and the backup feature, they had various different short stories. They had some for The Thing. A few of their characters. Great series. I highly recommend it. But, yeah. Now, Marvel has put the original run of this incarnation of the Guardians in trade. It's pretty much Guardians of the Galaxy by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning. It's 2 volumes. My best friend, who actually lives in Ohio now, he actually got those Barnes & Noble. I was very happy to see the fact that Marvel actually recollected these issues in like 2 big volume trades. It's only 2 volumes. I'm not sure. They're probably about $20, $25, depends on what Marvel wants to sell for, but it's well worth getting your hands on this thing. But I also recommend get your hands on the Annihilation trades, Annihilation Conquest, War of Kings, Realm Kings, and Thanos the Imperative. And of course, the group did have a brief tie into Secret Invasion. Yep, they did. Look it up, they did. And it was also thanks to this particular, thanks to the Dynamite Millennium run that Jack Flag basically, he was put into a wheelchair by Bullseye when he was stabbed in the spine. And of course, he came out the chair because thanks to alien technology, they were able to fix his spine. He was able to walk again, which was great. But yeah, it's basically, if you look at the whole group, with the exception of Drax and Gamora, a lot of the other characters will simply put semi-forgotten, semi-obscure characters that Marvel just brought together in the year 2008. Yep. I read an article when they said that, oh yeah, these characters that were created back in 2008 when the first one came out. No, the characters were created a lot earlier than that. Like, Groot was created back in the 60s. Rocket Raccoon and Star-Lord were created back in the 70s, along with frickin' Drax and Gamora. Pretty much a lot of the characters pretty much associated with the Guardians made a debut in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Yeah. Bug made his debut in the late 70s. He was part of the Micronauts series, and he's one of the very few characters that Marvel was able to retain after losing the Micronauts license. But a lot of the other characters are pretty much like from the 60s to the 80s. But mostly put from the 70s and 80s because Groot made his debut in the issue of During the Mystery. And he's the only character of the entire group who's actually creation of... He's actually two characters part of this lineup of the Guardians, this incarnation, who's actually a character created by Stan Lee, who actually was a cosmic character. Yep. Though Iron Man's part of the group, Flash Thompson, who's Stan Lee creation, though him becoming Venom, that was something that Dan Slott set up. But yeah, the Guardians are a great team, but instead of starting with the first time they collect Brian Michael Bendis' run, start with Road to Annihilation. You start there with those 2 volumes, then do the Annihilation trades, which I think Marvel's done some new printings of those, and then go with Annihilation Conquest, then do the main Guardians book, and of course read alongside of that get War of Kings, Realm of Kings, Thanos Imperative, and then of course then you go do Bendis stuff. Basically, it's a lot of trades, but it's well worth the money to get these things because this stuff is just so good to get. It's so good to read, and just great stuff when it comes to the modern day Guardians. But yeah, in a future episode, I will talk about the Guardians from the debut back in 1969 that were created by Arnold Drake and Gene Colan. Now, I have checked the credit basically for the modern day Guardians. It's only Denham and Lanning. The artist who basically did the first issue is not credited for creating the modern day version of the Guardians. No, for some reason he's not. I don't know why. Yeah, that's something really weird though. Despite now, Kevin McGuire, who did the JLI, he actually was the artist for the 2 volumes back of Guardians. When Bendis, he was the original artist for that one. Yeah. Let's see, who did this one? It was Paul Pelletier, Brad Walker, and Wes Craig. Yeah, these were the artists for pretty much the original run. For the most recent one, it was Kevin McGuire. And I think that was... Oh yeah, I almost forgot. They also gave briefly Gamora and Drax an ongoing series recently, but Drax got canceled after 11 issues. His series written by Colin Bunn and former WWE wrestler CM Punk. It's a really great book, and it's a great tribute to the cosmic universe of characters. Yeah, it's like Drax have his own team, being a PI. It was a great series. They also gave Gamora her own series. That series took place in the past, and that was written by, you're not going to believe this, Nicole Perriman, who was one of the co-writers of the original Guardians film. She got that series. And if you look at the series, it took place semi-present day with also flashbacks to the past. And apparently it's revealed that she's not the only survivor. Apparently there's more people, more of her species who actually survived. When it wasn't Thanos who killed them, it was some people. It was the Brotherhood of the Brood who killed her people, and there were more survivors aside from her. Yeah, so I highly recommend checking out the Gamora series, even though it was canceled to 5 issues. I don't know why Marvel did that for, but they did. Also, for that particular series, Marvel kept pushing they kept like pushing they kept delaying the start of the series several times. I think it was supposed to come out in February of last year. It was delayed several times, and it wasn't released until late last year. I mean, I have never seen it whenever the first issue for a series is heavily delayed for no reason. But it was canceled due to low sales, like Drax was. Star-Lord, after the Black Vortex crossover ended, after Secret Wars, Star-Lord got the Legend of Star got relaunched simply as Star-Lord, had 2 story arcs. One pretty much kind of deal with where they brought Mickey Rourke's character Yondu. They pretty much created a 616 version of him. It's referred to as Star-Lord Year 1. It took up the first 5 issues of this volume for Star-Lord, and the last 3 issues is just some guy trying to hook Kitty Pryde and Starlight back up. Apparently they broke up for some reason. And then the book was relaunched thanks to the storyline Grounded, where he's on Earth, and this was the run he got his new costume, which is the current costume he's wearing right now. Where in the first issue had, of course, this one was done by Chip Zdarsky, and in the first issue you had Kitty, which I'm not surprised to see her, and Howard the Duck. Howard the Duck, I wasn't surprised to see him at all, because Chip Zdarsky had just did his series, so I wasn't surprised to see him. But the one person I was very surprised to see in the first issue was Old Man Logan. I did not expect that. And what did Logan do? He took Peter Quill out drinking. Yep. He took him out drinking. He even took on freaking Black Cat and tried to get Alpha Flight take down Black Cat, a crime boss of all things. And Alpha Flight's supposed to be a space program, and they try and take down a crime boss. It's so funny. Yeah, Rocket had his own series as well, where he took on, first time in his whole entire history, he took on Kraven the Hunter and won. I'm not kidding. It's like Marvel has it where lately they've had Kraven take on people he never took on before. Because over the years, he's just taken on Spider-Man. Like in the last decade, he took on Kane, the Scarlet Spider. He took him on in the last arc of his series. He recently took on Eddie Brock, aka Venom. He never took him on before. Probably because he was dead at that point. He was dead prior to when Eddie Brock made his debut. But it's so interesting to see Kraven the Hunter go people. Oh yeah, he also went up against Black Panther and lost. Yeah, it's like, yeah, just put Kraven the Hunter in a book not featuring the Peter Parker Spider-Man, and the book turns out really good. But yeah, it's like, wow, it's so interesting the fact that Marvel did this for Kraven the Hunter. But yeah, pretty much like all the main 5 who appear in the movies have had ongoing series. Oh, almost forgot. There was a series for Groot done by Jeff Hopeless, and of course this created also the last book for Nova. That was ended and relaunched as Rock Raccoon and Groot. And after 10 issues, of course, that got replaced by another Rock Raccoon series, and that ended after 5 issues, replaced with Rocket, which was done by Al Ewing, and that book got canceled after only 5 issues. Yeah, it's like, really? It's like the last two books Rocket Raccoon's had, he just can't have a book last more than a year or two. It just lasts more than like a year. Like his last couple books only last like 6 months, which is odd, to say the least. But yeah, that's really it for the Guardians. Okay, so that's it for this episode. Stay tuned for whenever I get a chance to episode 33. It might be in the Guardians in the future. It might be the original Guardians. I don't know. I'll decide when I get up to that. Okay. Until I see you in the next episode. Bye.